Hi, welcome to Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Robert Green.
I'm your other host, Leslie Richardson.
And
I'm your first guest, Phil Gervixi.
There he is. Hey, Phil.
Hey.
And we're joined today by our special guest, Mr. Brian Randall. Hey, Brian.
Hello, hello.
We are continuing in our series on automated software testing. And previously in the series, we covered unit testing with XUnit. And what we thought we'd do today is do a little bit more on that, because we saw how you could run your unit tests yourself, but you can also, it turns out, have your tests run automatically as part of your DevOps practices. Is that right, Brian? Am I getting that accurate?
Absolutely. Automation
Sweet.
is king.
And you can do it whether you're using Azure DevOps or GitHub. And we're going to cover Azure in the first episode and GitHub in the next episode with Brian. So thanks so much for joining us. You folks will notice that we're all at home now. We weren't quite able to do this in the studio, which is why we're in different backgrounds, wearing different clothing.
No, we're actually in the studio. We just decided to have very elaborate green screens that make it look like
Phil might be wearing the same clothing.
I'm wearing the exact same thing.
I don't know what you were wearing
same thing. I
earlier,
feel like I was
Brian,
wearing this last
but
time.
I digress. Brian, talk to
Yes.
us about DevOps practices.
Well, one of the things we want to do when we do good DevOps is we want to think about repeatability and we want to think about automation. And a key aspect of that for developers is this notion of we want to go beyond it works on my machine. And so while it's great that Phil, for example, could run his tests maybe from the command line or in Visual Studio, there's still a direct dependency on his machine. And so what we want to do is introduce some kind of build machine and use good practices like continuous integration to run our unit tests automatically whenever code is checked in or pushed up into our centralized repo, which could be on Azure DevOps or on GitHub.
So not only were we relying on Phil to run the tests manually, we were relying on Phil to run the tests in the first place. So one of the benefits of having the tests run automatically on check-in is you're guaranteed that they get run.
Exactly. And one of the things that we can do is pick up maybe possible changes that are local dependencies on Phil's machine, maybe a hard-coded path, for example, or something that we're not aware of that could be an impediment to other developers pulling down the code and using it and running it.
So does this mean Phil never again has to run his unit tests because they're automatically going to be run? Is he totally off the hook?
Absolutely not.
Question.
Absolutely not. We want Phil to run his tests every time before he commits. And then we'll do the extra, pat on the back sanity check when it gets up into the server.
Well, and it's the same with builds, right? You still want to make sure it builds on your machine. You don't want to use your CI pipeline to figure out if you can build. Right?
Yeah, correct.
So we're going to build. It should be muscle memory for you, Control-Shift-B. And then, I use ReSharper, so it's a different set of hotkeys. But you can run all the unit tests just like you can do a build just from the keyboard.
Awesome. Brian, you want to show us how it works?
Absolutely. So if we were to look at my machine, we would see that I am at Phil's lovely repo where he has produced his code. But we'd like to use Azure DevOps. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab this URL here and copy it to the clipboard. And we'll jump over here to Azure DevOps. So what I did is I created a team project, which is the basic construct you use in Azure DevOps for collecting your assets. And I'm going to bring Phil's code over into my environment. And you'll notice there's a nice little import button here. And I'll put the URL. And because Phil has made this public, I don't have to authenticate. So I'll click import. And effectively, this is like doing a clone. It's just we're doing it server to server without having to bring it down locally and then push it back up.
So it is literally copying everything over. So do we now have two different repos?
We do. And so there's another way to do this if you would like to keep your code in GitHub, but then run the code with Azure pipelines. But that would be a third video we could do. But for now, we're going to stick to, this is as if the code started in Azure DevOps.
Perfect.
So if we take a look here, there's the code I'm sure Phil has showed you. And if I understand it correctly, you showed a bunch of great types of testing you can do, but we're going to focus on running these XUnit tests. Is that correct, Phil?
Yeah, we will be showing the rest. As of now, we've only shown the XUnit. So
fantastic. Okay, so this is where the code is. It's now local to Azure DevOps. And if I want to create a pipeline, you notice this magic blue button, create a pipeline. Now, this is where it gets interesting with Azure DevOps. It's been around for a while, and it supports two mechanisms to create pipelines. And if you'd like, I'll show you both. One is the kind of new YAML way, which is a text-based format, which gives us some flexibility in how we define our pipelines and how we share them. There is also the classic way. So let's start that way. So the classic way is a great learning tool because it's all very visual. And so what happens is the first question is, where's our code? And so you'll notice that
I love all the options.
Yeah, isn't that great? I mean, I could have literally pointed out to GitHub, but I would have had to create a relationship. And that code's Phil's code right now, and I wanted to have my own copy. So instead, I brought it in, so we'll pick Azure repos. And there's lots of options here about which repository, what branch you might want to use. And we'll hit continue. Now, this is where people are sometimes excited and they freak out, right? Too many choices. What do I do? The good news is we know that you're working on ASP.NET Core, correct, Phil?
yes.
Fantastic.
So you'll detect that automatically, or
it could, but the problem is because of lots of large solutions that are mixed languages and mixed technologies, it'd be really hard to guess. So it does want you to kind of pick, but you'll notice there's all these different templates, a lot of popular types. And so one of the great things that I've really liked about Azure DevOps for years and about GitHub both is that we want you to be able to build and run whatever makes you happy. So you'll see there's all sorts of cross-platform technologies, not just Microsoft tech, right? But I do love .NET and I love .NET Core. So we're going to pick ASP.NET Core and click Apply. And now what we've gotten here is a pipeline definition. And the first thing it wants to know is, what do you want to call it? How are you going to run it? And those type of things. So let's start with a name, and we'll just back this up, and we'll call this Channel 9 ASP.NET Core Classic. And then we have a couple questions to answer. So the first one is, what type of agent is going to run it? And the way Azure DevOps works is you have this notion of pools. A pool is a collection of one or more agents that will do the work you want it to do. Now, the best thing about Azure DevOps in the cloud is that it also provides runners in the cloud. And based upon your account structure, you can get some free minutes, or you might have to, give Microsoft some money. On the other hand, you can also set up a build agent inside your organization, and that can be set up in a self-hosted pool. But I'm just going to use the ones that are built up in Azure DevOps, so pick Azure Pipelines, and then I get to choose what type of agent I want to choose. And look at this glorious list. Lots of different choices. I can run Mac OS, Ubuntu, so multiple flavors of Linux, as well as a bunch of different flavors of Windows. Since this is .NET Core, I'm just going to use Ubuntu because that just feels good to me. Everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Fantastic. Now, here's the fun part. The template is trying to make it easy to get started. So it's saying, okay, I'm going to look for all of your C# projects. Now, if you did VB.NET, you might want to change that, et cetera. But we know we did C#, so we're going to pick that. And then it's also going to try and run all the test projects. However, correct me if I'm wrong, we saw that there were a bunch of different projects there. And so we're going to jump down here, and I'm going to grab the name of Phil's XUnit project. So I'll just pop that up here, use a little bit of clipboard inheritance, and then go back to that tab and tell it, you know what, just run the XUnit one. So I'm going to just pop that on, and I'll strip down the path because thankfully that ** is what's called a glob pattern, and it'll search to find that particular project.
So if you're unfamiliar with those patterns, like with the ***/ like, is there a place where you can go look that up just so in case you need to do more complicated or more filtered down files?
Absolutely. The documentation on this is actually really good. In fact, Leslie, that's a great thing because we might actually need that later. So what I could do is I could say, let's go over to Bing. And let's go Azure Pipelines, glob pattern. And believe it or not, you scroll down here, you'll see lots of good stuff on Stack Overflow. And look at this, pipeline caching. This whole doc session on Azure Pipelines has all sorts of good stuff. And they talk about things like glob patterns if you scroll down and look inside here. There you go. So here's an example, ** yarn.locks. So it's a quite common thing. But yes, the docs actually are quite good.
Awesome.
So if we go back over here to the definition, the way the template was designed here is that we have now filled in the minimum amount of data it needs. This should actually work out of the box at this point. However, because I want to focus just on the build and test parts, I'm going to disable these last two items. And that's mostly because I don't have a huge, deep understanding and knowledge of Phil's code base at this point. I don't know if he's doing web projects. I don't know if he's doing desktop apps. All those will work just fine, but the packaging syntax might be a little different. And this is optimized for just a web project in a particular folder. If we wanted to get into continuous deployment, again, another possible video, you could cover that as well. Okay. But basically, we're going to kick off the build. We'll do a .NET restore, a build, and test.
Hey Brian, so, go back to the original configuration where you're putting in the names, right? And you showed the globbing pattern. Because if you notice, the default name was capital T, lowercase, or lowercase t, that was an or, and then tests, ESTS, .csproj. So the naming convention we tend to use in real life, not demo code like what we have here, is if I've got a, my company, Pintus.services, right? That's the name of my project. And we would make the test project, Pintus.services.tests, right? We would name it with tests after it. And I just wanted to point that out because the projects to test had that default template in there. But of course, I didn't follow that standard when I created the samples for the show.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Phil. When I do it as well, I like to have a distinction between unit tests and, say, automated UI tests using Playwright or Selenium. And so what I often do is I'll lead with test dot and then the type, right? Test.unit, test.automation or Playwright. But yes, good naming conventions are a great thing to do.
And stay tuned for the Playwright episode, which I think we're going to be talking about later. Yeah.
I might actually have to watch that. That's great. Now, I just want to show two more things before we get started. Out of the box, the Azure DevOps pipelines are going to be set to run manually. However, if you click on triggers, you'll see you have lots of choices to control how and when a build were to run. For example, you can schedule it to run every night. You can also come over and say, hey, when another build completes, run this build. Or the most common thing, enable continuous integration, which means when someone pushes code up to the repo, and by default, it'll pick your main branch, I would like a build to run. So this is something you'll definitely want to set up and consider looking into things like pull requests and getting your code up there. But just wanted to point that out. So last but not least, I got to save my pipeline. So I'm going to do a two-step here. I'm going to do a save and say created first version of my pipeline. And when I do the save, I'm also going to do a save and run, which is going to take the pipeline, feed it to an agent, and kick off the build process. And you'll see it takes us to the execution here, and there's a bunch of information on here. Number one, it shows me the last commit that Phil made, which was called Lone Wolf for whatever reason. And you'll see that it picked up the fact that since this is the verse pipeline, there were 3 commits done at the very beginning. So the build infrastructure in Azure DevOps tracks the number of times you run builds so it can make a distinction between the first build and the last build and give you things like number of changes between builds. You can look at the history and things like that. So you'll see repository information, you'll see the time and date, and then we're going to see some information about tests and results once our job finishes. And we can watch it run, and you'll see we're cranking along, check out work, restore, and now we're doing a build. And one thing you'll see is that it's picking up things like build and compile warnings and errors. Phil looks like he could work on cleaning up some warnings. Just going to throw that out there. Now it's running our tests.
The test ran.
Yeah, the beautiful thing is look at all these nice check boxes, and they are green circles with checks, but the happy check like that means success. If it was bad, it'd be a red X. So let's go back over here and take a look. Well, Shazam, look at that. Tests and coverage, 93.4% of your tests passed. Now, I want to see more details about this. So if I click this, it'll take me right into this nice summary, and it looks like 3 of your tests are set not to run. So is it possible maybe you disabled them, Phil?
Yeah, correct. We're showing how you would skip a test. So that's
perfect
by design.
And then you'll notice over here, it's showing you that, hey, nothing bad happened. There's no test failures. But what you could do is say, well, show me the ones that were skipped, for example. So I can click over here and say others. And this will show you the 3 tests that were designed to not run explicitly. You can also filter down to show you the past tests and look at them individually and see how long they took, any issues, etc. And if you were to spit out additional data, it would show up there as well.
So messages and whatnot. So is it all of the information that we saw in Visual Studio? Can you see that in Azure DevOps?
It really depends upon how it's outputting the data.
Okay.
And the particular type of tests. I don't want to generalize because it depends everything from XUnit to JUnit to all the different types of test operations that are available.
Could you go back into the ones that were skipped and then
absolutely
the skip message came across? I think that's where Robert was heading with that one. If not, I'm sorry I interrupted you, Robert.
Nope, that's where I was heading. Then
it just says not executed. Yeah, there was no stack tracer error, so no. So this one did not spit out any extra data.
I also saw some extra ways to filter those tests aside from like other and stuff that passed. There was like passed on rerun. There was like not impacted. What do some of those mean?
Oh, okay. Well, you've opened up Pandora's box. So there is a feature that has gone through unfortunately a torturous life cycle since its inception in 2010. There's a feature called test impact analysis. And the idea is to increase the performance of your builds, your CI builds in particular, so that it only has to run tests that are impacted by the changes in your code base. And again, that requires a good orchestration of collaboration between the testing framework you're using, the testing language, the build language, so like say .NET, .NET Core, etc. I apologize, I haven't kept up on all the current data where we stand with .NET Core, specifically I should say .NET 6 with ASP.NET Core, if that all works. And a part of it is just the fact that the amount of engineering effort that goes into that isn't always met with, how should I say, an active reception by the market. And so it's a feature that is available in certain languages and technologies that Azure DevOps understands, but I don't think it's available in .NET 6 today.
Gotcha.
Cool. So you set up the pipeline to automatically run this exact same tests on check-in. That's very cool. And you mentioned there were 2 ways of doing it: the easy to use wizardy way you did, and what's the hard way?
Well, it's not so much the hard way. It just, I'm going to be honest here. I'm an old fart. I've gone through multiple years of wonderful configuration files to describe what we want done. Anybody remember INI files?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No.
We've done INI files. We've done XML files. We've done JSON. And now some kids on the internet decided that, hey, we should describe our CI/CD processes with YAML. YAML, yes, YML or YAML. YAML ain't markup language or yet another markup language. And so if we click new pipeline, and this time to say, hey, let's just follow along here, let's go configure a pipeline. And on one hand, it feels kind of warm and fuzzy, like, okay, we're going to get some template choices just like before. But instead of getting a graphical experience, we're going to get a text file. And now it's up to us to start typing. Now, it's not that bad. The Azure DevOps folks got some feedback on this, and they do have a feature called the Assistant. And the Assistant will help us a little. It'll help us write some YAML. But I'm going to hide that for a second and talk about what you see here. So this is basically a text-based representation of what I showed you earlier with not all the features there. In fact, this is focused on only the first part, which is where am I going to run it and what am I going to do, which in this case is simply a build. So to do some additional steps, we're going to have to write some YAML. Now, the thing to watch out for YAML, which can be a little frustrating at first, is that it is white space sensitive. So you do need to get things aligned effectively. The nice thing about this, though, is by being a YAML file, it lends itself to some more traditional management techniques that we do with source code files, whereas the classic templates are primarily represented by a GUI. They are backed by a JSON file, but it does require some extra engineering effort to really take advantage of that. So what they chose to do with the YAML files here is that you'll notice that on the screen here, it says that, hey, we're going to create a file called Azure Pipelines.yml, and that's going to be committed into our repo. Now, why is that cool? Here's why. Because I now can branch and merge this as I work on my projects. So a good example is Phil right now has decided that he's going to build an ASP.NET Core web application with a bunch of tests. But he might decide later to add, I don't know, a Maui application. That'd be cool. And the Maui application would probably take a little while to build. So he might create a branch to do that development work on. And he'd want to then modify the build to try and build the Maui app. But he only wants to do that in the branch that's specific to the code that he's working on with Maui. So that's an example where we get some flexibility in using YAML files over the traditional classic pipelines. So yeah, it's not too horrible.
So what would the YAML look like that is equivalent to the pipeline you created earlier?
Well, I've got to do a little work there. Yeah, we're gonna build it right now. So,
right.
And Phil, you're gonna help me in case I mess up some of the syntax here, but basically this is the .NET build command. Now, when you do a .NET build like this, it's just saying, okay, I assume I'm gonna find something in the current directory to actually compile. The problem with this is that Phil's code is under a folder called SRC, which is exactly what I do. And in fact, what we really want to build is this SLN file. So I'm going to copy this path, go back over there, and I'm going to put that after the build statement. And come over here, and we'll paste that in. And then what I want to do here is, because this is actually in what's called a workspace folder, I'm going to put a period dot and tell it to look for it there. So this should find our SLN. And then the -- configuration says, go build whichever version is being specified here in the build configuration. So it's going to run a release build. Okay, so that's step one. But now the next step is, well, how do I run my unit tests? Okay, well, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a way to run a .NET test. Isn't it something like .NET test?
Yep.
Okay, so this is where I might have to dig out Google, et cetera, and figure this out, or, call one of my friends and say, how do I do this? But Microsoft does love you. And so if we click on Show Assistant, we're going to come over here, and you'll see that there's a bunch of different options here. Oh, cool. So what if I did test? Oh, sweet. There's a .NET Core option. And if I click the drop down, it'll let me pick test, and then I can get the path to the project. Oh, this looks familiar. So we'll go back down here to our XUnit examples, and I'll copy this path out. And again, this is the same type of box earlier, like when Leslie asked me about the glob pattern stuff. We could do a glob pattern or be more explicit, and looks like I got a little clipboard inheritance problem there. So, you got to be careful. Okay. And that was because of what I copied from. I copied from the wrong place. Now, arguments are interesting, right? When you think about running a test, there's lots of configuration and stuff we can work with. Let's just see if we can get away with this working out of the box. And click Add, and watch what happens. It basically took that UI and then spit out some YAML for me. And the nice thing is they did make it bi-directional. If I click settings, I can go back in there. So this makes it not as horrible, right? The key is make sure you have your cursor in the right place and that you get the YAML aligned. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good. So I'm going to click save and run. Now, just like before, this is going to cause a save to occur. But instead of just a save to some backend Magic Plumbing in Azure DevOps, it's going to commit the YAML file into my repo. So this will be a branchable entity. So come over here. The default is fine. Again, I'm doing DemoWare at this point. So you might think you can do a PR normally, but fine. Save and run. And away we go. We're back to the same screen as before. And so it's a matter of checking the job and see if I got all my slashes and dashes correct. And I may or may not, but we'll see.
So the parameters that you can pass in, and we're going to talk about this in a later episode when we talk about integration testing. So you can test, for example, your data access layer. And you don't want to run those types of tests on every check-in because they're time consuming and expensive, right? So what you can do is in that pipeline, you can pass in an XUnit allows you filtering based on test collections, right? So we can put in the collection names of we only want to run these tests in here.
Cool.
Now, I've got a bunch of green check boxes. So it looks like I screwed up something though. .NET file matching specified pattern were not found. Okay. I think I messed up on the paths. So we'll come over here. We're going to go edit the pipeline. And sure enough, I left off the dot. And so what's going to happen is it didn't know how to find the path. So we'll save that, save and rerun, and let that go again. There it is.
And so the idea about enable continuous integration, is that important somewhere?
Well, it turns out that when they set this up, this is already enabled for that automatically.
Okay.
So you can adjust the triggers and do things with just some YAML as opposed to a UI element.
But to hook up the pipeline to run automatically on check-in, then you enable continuous integration. Is that right?
Yes, but it's already done automatically for the YAML files.
Okay.
They figure if you're going that lifestyle, then you want that. Okay, I got a green checkbox. But where's,
success.
It said success. There we go.
There we go. Yay.
Yeah, it's freaking me out. Exactly. Okay. So again,
Excellent.
Same setup as before. Now, I will show you, do we want to go for a bonus piece of stuff real quick?
No, I think this is probably a pretty good time to stop. I think we've seen the main point is that it's pretty straightforward, whether you use the classic way or you use YAML. YAML is what GitHub Actions uses. We're going to see that in the next episode. So it's a good thing.
YAML's nice if you want to have more fine-grained control over what's kind of happening behind the scenes, I imagine, right?
Well, it's that fine-grained control. You can get some extra, you can do some more advanced things. And then honestly, once you get the hang of it, it's like writing code, right? Mm-hmm. When you get more comfortable with your programming language of choice, YAML's not that bad, in all honesty. It's just, it's a bit rough when you're first learning sometimes. And it kind of forces you down that, the Google, Bing, Clipboard Inheritance, Stack Overflow approach. But the docs for both Azure DevOps and when we look at GitHub are really good. You just got to actually give them a shot. Or read people's books like Phil, because I'm sure he has a whole chapter dedicated to the syntax of YAML. Oh, wait, it's Pro C#, not Pro YAML.
Excellent. All right. Cool. Thank you, Brian. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
In the next episode, we'll see how to do this all using GitHub Actions. So until then, thanks a lot, and we will see you next time on Visual Studio Toolbox.